Thanks for listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. 1 hour of tips from experts and real stories from people just like you. For those thinking about what lies ahead, for those going through the job search, and those who have paved the way to their next career after the military. These professionals are dedicated to helping you move forward successfully to the next phase of your career after the military. Welcome to Exchange.
So, Derik, you were great at giving us resources on the folks that you were reaching out to. And I like that you mentioned that you wish you may have started a little earlier, asking for help and collaborating. You do a lot of mentoring, and I'm sure through Veterati, at one point when you are fully on your own, you're going to return that service by being a mentor. Your posts on LinkedIn are so interesting to me because you truly are creating content that is something we can use, all of us, today. Why don't you give us some of the things you're really passionate about, things that our listeners can leave, go home, start working on today? What would you recommend?
I think the things that I like to talk about is just stuff that you can apply. I mean, there's a difference between here's what a body language signal is, and then like here's the application. Can I tell a story?
Sure, please tell all stories.
Great. So the other day I was at the dentist's office, and I walked in, and I just opened up the door, and for some reason as I opened the door, my arms swung open, so they were away from my body. And that's generally like when I'm in presentation mode. Like if I'm standing in front of an audience, then I'll open up my arms a lot more. And so I was open already. And then when I was in the lobby, I saw there's like 10 people in there in the waiting room. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's an audience. And I just kicked into presentation mode. So I stood a little taller, and I showed them my palms. I was like, here you go. Here's my palms. I'm a presenter. And I was just like, hello, everyone. Welcome to the waiting room. And some people looked up and they were, quizzical, and some people smiled, and some people, one dude had his phone and he was like, really, I'm busy here. You could, I did what I do. I just sized up the room, and I was like, yeah, all right, there you go. And the receptionist responded with the same type of energy. She was like, yes, it's Friday. Come on in. And I was like, I own this room right now. I just own it. And then I went over and I talked to the receptionist, and she said, but oh my gosh, you're an hour early. And so I just made a show of myself, and everyone is now watching me. So, I did what I do. And I turned to the audience, my new audience, and I was like, I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I was supposed to come in and say hello to the 11 o'clock crowd, not you guys. They all laughed at me. But here's the thing. That's what I do. Okay, I present, and I stand out, and I look for those opportunities to engage people. Okay, but right after I did that, there was this woman that said, well, I'm not in a hurry. If you need to go right now, you can. And I think that's the power of connection. I connected with this group of people, and at that moment she was like, you know what? Maybe she was just like, I'm afraid of needles. I don't want to go in there. I don't know. But she, but she offered this to me. And I think that's where connection comes in. Now, am I saying that you have to be grandiose and silly in order to make a connection with people? Absolutely not. But those are things that I do. So what I'm saying is, do what you do. Like your strengths are your strengths. So use them how you would use them to make a connection with people. If you're introverted, then use it to listen to people and help them through something. Whereas someone extroverted like me would be like, hey, hello everyone, what's going on?
I'm here. Yeah. Welcome to the show. Yeah. Being an extrovert, my mother has a great saying, if we were all the same, it would be a really noisy place. And I agree that we need extroverts, ambiverts, introverts, and those who do not identify as either or any of those three. It is, and you might be one day and something else the other. You might be completely burned out from being an extrovert, not feeling extroverted. It doesn't
It takes a
necessarily
lot of
make you
energy.
introverted. Yeah, and it's a lot of energy to put yourself out there. And I speak from as a super user. You give yourself some rest. Interviewing. Let's talk about interviewing because I know you're focusing a lot of your work on that.
Right.
What are some of the things that you're coaching folks about? Now, the interviewees, not the interviewers. The interviewees,
Right.
the folks that are listening to our podcast today. What are maybe your top 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20, however many you want to do? What do you think are some of the biggest issues, other than the fact that a lot of them, those folks listening, have not interviewed before?
So are you're talking about just like people who are interviewing for a job or
Yep.
yeah, okay. I think some of the key factors are going to be starts from the beginning. Okay, just realize that it starts from the time you show up in the parking lot really. Um, because like that how you show up, how you walk in, it sets a tone. How you say hi to people, it sets a tone. Um, you have a chance beforehand to dry your hands, make sure they're not sweaty, to breathe and just control your breathing beforehand. So once you get in, make sure you're confident, you walk tall, stand increase your space without
Okay.
taking up someone else's space, right? So
Yeah.
there's a difference between my being confident and large and me taking up other people's space and invading their space. So be cognizant of that, but show your like the center of your body. It's what I call the vulnerability triangle. Uh, Basically, the area between your eyes to your genitals, that's where your vital organs are. So when people are uncomfortable, they will tend to cover those areas up somehow.
Intuitive,
And
yes. Or kind of
yeah, like it's like
down and
turtling.
cover.
Yeah, you,
Mm-hmm.
you bring your head down into your body. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's you show that you're uncomfortable, and it's okay to be nervous in your interview, but
Yes.
you want to portray confidence, and you do that by opening up that vulnerability triangle. One of the
Okay.
ways you can remember to do that is to keep your arms away from your body. So
Okay.
sitting a little closer than it was before, but if I can show you my palms, then
Okay.
it's like a where I'm showing you like I don't have any weapons in my hand, so I am not a threat to you. And people feel more comfortable just looking at your palms. So wherever you can, if you have your Zoom interview, then make sure that you are in a position where you can show your palms. Yeah, except now your knife hand. There's my palm, but it's that's an invasion of space. Anytime you
Right.
get really close to the camera,
Mm-hmm.
invasion of space. So where you can open up, it shows confidence. Where you can kind of keep your feet strong and sturdy, maybe shoulder width, then
Okay.
you're showing confidence. If you're bringing your feet underneath the chair, then it's kind of an escape mechanism. I'm trying to get away. If you're pointing your feet towards the door, you're indicating that's where you want to be. I don't want to be in this interview. I want to be out the door. Okay, you're sending signals that you are uncomfortable about being there. Handshake too. Sometimes you'll see on like a lot of places you can look up anywhere about how people will all the bad handshakes that you can do.
Yes.
I don't
The
really want to
worst.
cover what y'all are. You can look them up, but they happen, and sometimes they happen accidentally. So sometimes if you get a bad handshake, someone closes down on your fingers just a little bit too soon, or you close on their fingers too soon. It's okay to reset and say, wait a second, that didn't work. Let me try again. I think some people
Okay.
feel like they have to stick with it. And especially in a job interview, you want to be like, you want to get that good contact palm to palm, which releases endorphins. And if it's not right, fix it. And then they know at least you're a person who wants to do things correctly.
Okay. I had a great tip that I'll share with you. Someone I interviewed recently said that his commanding officer put everyone through a handshake test and would mentor people for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, however long it took until they got to the right handshake to take out into the civilian world. And I thought
Nice.
that's a nice commanding officer. I wonder what they were up to the other 40 hours of the week. But, they were really appreciative of that, because to have someone that they admired that was already a victim mentor to give them that and to get that feedback. I think we learn so much on our own, Derek, and we look to YouTube, we look to LinkedIn, we look to, things we can do in our quiet time on our own to learn. But I really want to explore, what can you do maybe with other people, not just your significant others or your children or your sisters, brothers, parents, whoever, or maybe your colleagues in your battalion or your fleet or wherever you are. How might you really start using these skills or working on them person to person? Do you have any tips for that?
So one of the things that I always do is first you go somewhere, anywhere you go, like just watch, just look at people. Um, I think we do this more often than not. We got the phone when as soon as we get somewhere, and to avoid boredom, then all of a sudden I'm looking down, I'm looking away.
Yeah.
And we've been socially distancing at points in our lifetime, and I think because of this, and maybe even with as we see more AI integration, we're gonna lose out on a lot of our human to human skills. So first, observe. Like when you go places, watch people and see what they do, see what reactions they do. As you hear their conversation, ask yourself, why does their face look like that whenever they say this? You don't have to know what 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 each signal in body language means. Even experts get them wrong sometimes. What they
Yeah.
notice is deviations from a baseline, these deviations from something that is normal. So until you know what normal is, then
For
you,
that
you won't
person.
know
For that
deviations. Yeah,
person.
for that
Right,
person.
right.
Each individual person, of course, is different.
Uh-huh.
Until you know what those are, then you can't notice when there's a problem, and that may be a problem with PTSD, and that may be a problem with just
Social
like interpersonal
anxiety. Yeah.
anxiety, or even like you notice that there's a predator around a small child. You don't notice those things until you know what normal looks like, and if we're
Right.
forgetting, that is. So yeah,
Uh,
first thing, observation, and then second is just like use a lot of trial and error. Like if you have trusted friends, be like, if you see something that looks uncomfortable, sometimes we don't want to address it because we're like, oh well, that's just how they are. I don't want to get into their stuff. I want to leave them alone. uh, there isn't anything wrong with saying, I noticed you did this. What were you thinking when that happened? And because a lot of times you might pick up on something that you should pick up on and you should talk about, and sometimes you're misinterpreting the signal. But by asking about it, then they can explain a little bit about their thought process, and then
I,
you can match that thought process with the next time you see that type of behavior.
Interesting. You you said something about being uncomfortable, and it made me think of something. We talk about creating baseline. The behavior panel talks about it a lot, and it
Mhm.
reminds me of your training. And I realize now that you didn't say the word earlier in your introduction, but I know you've done interrogation. So when you're interrogating folks and you're interviewing folks, rather you're collecting information. You're a collector. As you're collecting information, you are trained to go deeper into something. If you see something, you say something because that might give you more information. Now, I try and teach people to do this in the interview. If there's something that they aren't quite sure of, say a recruiter or a hiring manager is saying something that is a little ambiguous, or if they speak really quickly past something, please feel free to raise your hand and say, you brought something up that really piques my interest. Could I ask you more questions about that? Or you mentioned an acronym, and even though in the military you live in the world of acronyms, that acronym might not be something that you're familiar with. I think one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself is to ask those questions and not just assume that you're supposed to get through the interview. It is not your job to just muscle through something. Now, if you know that you're not going to work for this company and you're just basically going through the motions, then let's not put this. But if this is a company you've researched, if this is somebody, a company that maybe one of your friends who is departed the military is working in your high referral, then you're going to spend as much time and energy showing interest and asking those questions. Now, Derik, you do this second nature because this has been your X amount of years in the military. You do this for everybody. But let's say somebody has been working in finance or driving trucks or just, infantry. They're not really in the collection space. They're relying on you folks. How might they just really gain these skills? I don't mean in a hurry, but how might they start working on these things ahead of their transition timeline?
So I think, I love the word that you used was interview. I've never done a single interrogation. I'll tell you that right now, not a single one, because I call them interviews. I say that, let's have a talk. I like whether it's an adversary or whether it's like someone that's willingly giving me information. For me, it's all the same. It's someone I'm interviewing, and we're just having a conversation. And I think one, you have to just be willing to have those conversations. Just sit down. We talked a little bit before about extroverts and introverts, but in either case, as you talk to people, then each one brings something to the table. Like, so as an extrovert, then I want to get people talking all the time, and I'll say things to get people talking. Whereas introverts are more like they're just good listeners, and people can pick it up right away. Like if I start talking, this person's going to listen.
Yep.
So either way, you have your interactions, and in those interactions, one of the things that you're going to want to know is, and we talked about comfort and uncomfort. Recognize that there's two things. That this is kind of binary. Body language is, for me, I just like to say that it's binary. And sometimes I talk to like coders and stuff, and I say that, and it clicks for them, because people are either comfortable or they are uncomfortable. Now that comfort may vary in from slight to extreme, but it's either or. And so if you notice discomfort in any degree, then it's for a reason. And so you just decide at that moment, do I need to know the reason? Is it important to know the reason for us to build this relationship or to get this job done? Or if not, maybe you hold off, but keep it in your head. There's discomfort there. When we talked about, you mentioned finance, when we talked about a particular budget, like you're going to get this much budget, and then you see the discomfort, okay, address it. Address it when you see it, because if you don't address it, then someone's going to be concerned about it for a long time, and they won't be paying attention to anything else that you're talking about. And later on down the road, when you're like, okay, we all agreed on this budget, then someone's going to sideswipe you and in the next meeting and be like, wait a second, we have some other things. We have some other issues. But it all stems from that discomfort that you're getting this much budget. So once you see, like you throw out a particular point of interest that may cause issues, like I did when I went into the dentist office, like I started sizing up my audience. Like, this guy was smiling, this guy adjusted to see what to see me better. This guy looked over and he was like, hey, I'm busy on my swiping left on my phone. So now I know I have to work with swipe left guy. I have to figure out what his issue is before we can really move on, because he's not paying attention until that point happens.
And you're going to see that in the interview is true. There's especially now that we go back in person, you're going to have people sitting in front of you like a panel. And I believe, just from the folks that I've talked to in the military, whenever you're sitting in front of a panel of people, it's usually not a good thing, right? You're being investigated. You're being asked. You might be promoted, but it's stressful. So if you've ever been in that situation in the military, it's not normally good. So let's try and erase that from your memory so that you,
Everyone's been in a board where it's like, oh my gosh.
yes. And you don't sleep the night before. I mean, it's similar to an interview. You're probably not going to sleep the night before. You're going to be doing your research. You're going to be looking everybody up on LinkedIn. You're going, if you have the names of the people. But I think it's really important that, and I present a lot too, I always find the people that aren't paying attention and I focus my attention on them. I never say it out loud. I'm the president of a women's organization for this current year, and I have to stand at the dais and introduce our speaker and talk about the business, the housekeeping, things like that. And this is a comfortable group, but there was a couple of women recently that were like chit-chatting, and I just patiently waited, and then I started looking at them and speaking to them, and they stopped. And that's I'm not saying that you're there to teach or school the people that are earworm you, but if you want to command, like Derik has taught us, the room, you really have to show, and I want to say this is a great way to show confidence, is that you slow down and that you focus your efforts, maybe making eye contact, practice making eye contact, and also, speaking to the people that might be looking at their phone, not to make them uncomfortable, but to let them know that you see them and that you are paying attention. I think, I noticed that a lot. 2 to 3 people usually in interviews for my past clients, and I either then coach the interviewers to make the interviewees feel more comfortable, especially if they're transitioning out of the military, because they might not have those skills. We're really here to get to their functional technical expertise and then tell them about the company. So while I do think corporations are shifting to the got ya, to the welcome, we know you have choices. There's still going to be those folks that are trying to get you. So be prepared for get you. And then if you get a welcoming interview team, wonderful, make friends, even if you don't get the job. What else would you like to add? I could talk to you forever, Derik, and I know our segments are shorter, but I would love to have you back on the show as you progress in your career. Why don't we start by letting folks know how they can find you, maybe on LinkedIn? You have a very unusual spelling of your first name, so why don't you go ahead and spell it out for the folks that aren't watching us?
So I do post regularly on LinkedIn, and with some content that is like here's how the body language fits into everyday life, or how it fits into if you're an interviewer or if you're an interviewee. I kind of try to mix it up. But that's it's at DERIK.CLARK. And you will find, like I mentioned, it'll like the title will say Body Language Alchemist. But also like I have a website that's called Body Sites. That's my company name.
And is it SATES or SIGHTS?
Like, yeah. So it's kind of almost like a play on words, because like the symbol has like a sight post for a rifle, but then there's like a person with it as well. So because like I want people to be able to use this as a weapon, kind of to protect themselves, not a weapon to hurt other people, but like understand how body movements are affecting you, how they protect how you can use them, protect your finances, your emotions, your physical person, um, and so kind of that's kind of where that goes. But bodysites.com is where you can find some more information.
We're awesome. Thank you so much for your time and energy, Derik. I look forward to seeing how you grow in your business and really appreciate all the things you shared with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'd be happy to come back and talk to you anytime.
Oh, you will. You absolutely will. Thanks. Have a great day. For those of you listening, we'll be right back.
Welcome to Exchange. I'm Cheryl Cross. I'm so pleased to have one of our experts join us today, Steve Cotone. He is a 20-plus year veteran of the recruiting industry, but he didn't just come from recruiting. He has a background in both manufacturing and the defense contracting industry. He's going to bring us so many relevant things and things you can take away from this segment. But today we're going to be talking about resumes. Welcome, Steve. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. You have so much information. And I know you and I have had discussions and we've been planning this for a minute. What are your thoughts? What do you think the most important thing is for resumes? There's a lot of misinformation out there, but how might someone like the folks that are listening really do the best thing as they move forward to find a new job?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is to make sure your resume is specific to the job or interview or company that you're looking for. You can have a master resume, which is great. You'll pull information from that, but being specific to what you're looking for and the job you're looking for is the most important thing you can do.
How could someone who's got a lot of acronyms, military service, non-civilian speak information on their actual military resume, pull it over to a civilian speak type of resume?
Yeah, I know that's great. We talk in acronyms all the time, but once you're outside of the military, those acronyms, they don't translate to civilian life, just like individual industry speak doesn't translate outside of that industry. Skills are transferable, but the language isn't. So really think about, again, as you are beginning to really personalize your resume, think about the person on the other side of the table that's looking at that. How might they see your resume, and what might they understand and what might they not understand? If they don't understand your resume, your chance of getting in front of them goes way down.
Yeah.
So
let's.
Oh, please.
No, I think you said something that's important, your chance of getting in front of them. We need to talk about that a bit because I think that's one of the greater fears. But specific to resumes, I'm curious, resource-wise, I know, having worked in the military space for a minute, there are resources available to these folks, to the folks listening, and they are the military family support centers. Now, each base should have them, or each branch of the military should have access to someone, even if you do a Zoom call or a phone call. But I think that a lot of folks aren't taking advantage of this. There's a ton of information on the internet. I learned something new, Steve, and I don't know if you knew this. There are some companies that are taking an MOS and translating into what might work for their company. Big companies, telecommunications companies, ones that have both manufacturing, not, I would say defense, but interior work, not going out and doing the work in the field. So I like that companies are starting to norm towards how might we accommodate you, but that's only a few companies. You brought something up about acronyms, and I could go down the rabbit hole on acronyms forever. The military is famous for them. You use something about SMART metrics in our show notes. Can you talk about SMART as it goes to this, and what you meant by SMART and the metrics, and using that in the resume?
Yeah, absolutely. So, resumes, brevity is important, and I'll dive into that in a second too, but that ties into SMART metrics and bullet points, and really being able to sell yourself, tell your story in quick, relatable information, and SMART metrics allow you to do that. SMART is simply an acronym, which I'm telling you not to use, but it's an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Now, those five things are very effective tools to use while you're working and while you're leading and while you're training. But also, when you're thinking about building your resume, that's exactly what people want to see, and they want to see it very quickly. You can put a lot of fluff into a resume, but think about it from the other side of the table. They're looking at a piece of paper, maybe two. You don't want an 11-page resume. So you've got a sheet of paper or two to tell your story. And your story is, how can I help you become a more efficient company, increase your gross revenue, increase your net profit, and you have a page and a half to 2 pages to do that. So specific is very important. Measurable is the data that you're putting in there.
I like that attitude. How might I help you? How might my skills lend to your organization? I think that's missed. We're so worried about putting all the good things that we did into a resume, and it does burden it. What's important to a hiring manager might not be exactly what you've done, but you do want to show that you have the skills that lean towards it.
That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. And maybe we can set on that for just a second, because it's so important. It's how might a hiring manager see you and what your ability is to help them. It does come down to relationships at the end of the day, but your resume is the story of how you can help them to get you in front of someone. That's the key.
Agreed. Resume, and for the folks that are listening, and I say this a lot, a resume is to get you to the next step.
Yes.
It is not to get your job. It's to get to the conversation of the job. The conversation of the job gets you the job. The interview gets you the job, but you got to get to the interview, and the resume is the key for that locked door. Since this is so important, I know you believe this too, specializing a resume for each job, that feels like a lot of work. But why is that important, Steve?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. So, it's not a lot of work. It's research up front. Know the company that you're interviewing or would like to interview with. That can be done online on their website. Know what they do, know the role, and you're looking at the role and then your resume. What are the skills that you have? What have you accomplished? And how are they relevant to the requirements of the position? And you'll pull those over. It's important for a couple of reasons. It shows you understand what you're applying for. It shows that you understand how to transfer your specific skill set into what they're doing outside of the military, and then becoming personalized. Going further down into your resume, you want to talk about, the things that, your school, clubs that you're engaged in, groups that you're a part of. Well, who might be reading that resume? LinkedIn's a great tool for that, to find out who's the hiring manager, who's the HR manager. If you are in that same club, or you've got a connection, you have the same hobbies, anything to make that connection on your resume. Get it in there, because you've got 2 pages to make that initial connection, to try to get in front of them. Know the job, show them that you can understand what they're doing, and transfer your skill set in writing cohesively and concisely.
Right.
And then you try to hit a relationship point to make a connection.
I like how you phrase that.
Things.
We talked about the 11-page resume, and then you talk about a 2-page resume. I love that one of the things when I do my speaking and presentations, the one thing I tell people is please try not to stick everything on 1 page. Yeah. I don't care if you have only 4 years in the military. Try and move it to at least 2, and brag a little bit about yourself specifically for the job. Don't try and get everything on 1 page. I found, and maybe Steve, you found this too, a lot of people are leaving things out because they have this bad myth, this urban legend that every resume should be 1 page. And I think that's fine if you're just getting out of college or high school, but certainly not if you spend any amount of time in a specialty field in the military and you're looking to translate that to civilians. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, agreed. And you can stretch it a little bit. But, just like the military, what's what the end point up front, right? You want to know what the end point is up front. What are you trying to accomplish? Same thing with the resume. You're in your chain of command. Do you want to hand someone, 6 pages to 10 pages of what you're going to do? Or do they want to see exactly what the smart activities are to accomplish the goal quickly, So yeah, if you've got a long storied career, 3 pages ish, but I heard one, and I don't know, I can't recall where I heard this. It was a training class. Brevity is confidence.
Oh.
And if you can confidently say what you need to say, and you can say it in brief, specific, and measurable, you're exuding confidence, and that's important.
Let's say that the folks that are listening don't have access to their career counselors, or they're not getting the information they need. Where would you direct somebody? Could they work with you specifically, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a handful of things, a handful of ways to engage. There are professional resume writers. You can pay someone to help you with your resume, and they'll spend a lot of time with you in building out your resume. They do a great job. And it's a service that is their job specifically. Absolutely. I work with folks all day long, and I help them with their resumes. There's no cost to it. It's, my goal is to, get talented people in front of companies that need talented people, and we're matchmaking for the right position, finding the right person for the right role. And it's all part of it. So yes, so I would say you can pay someone to do it. I'm happy to do it. Recruiters will help you. And most recruiters will absolutely help you with that. And there's a lot of great recruiters out there, and use the resources online. That's pretty, social. LinkedIn, Google how to write a resume. But I would stay away from the getting too fancy with your resume. It's more about the detail. Think more about the detail and less about the format.
Okay.
Formats change all the time, but oftentimes when applying for a job, you're dropped into a computer program. And oftentimes those computer programs may not keep up with the changes in formats of resumes. So, for example, a lot of programs some programs, I should say, that I'm aware of don't capture information on the left and the right side margins. So if you've got your name, it looks beautiful on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of the margin, no one will ever see it.
Yeah.
And you'll get shuffled right along, and you'll miss the boat and not know why.
That's interesting you bring that up. I was using a wonderful ATM or CT, it's called CRM system at one of the companies. And if somebody put their information into a header or a footer, it wouldn't pick it up. So
Yes.
I would get a lot of blank resumes like,
yes,
how do I? And so
Yeah.
I had to then take it out of the system, open it into my Word program, hope that, because it thinks it's part of the page is what it does. I think it embeds it, but it doesn't show up. And I don't know that everybody knows that. So thank you for bringing that up. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, real important. And, in times of low unemployment, resumes that companies are getting, they're getting them in stacks, or high unemployment, I should say, flip it. But when a hiring manager is seeing, 50 resumes and one's not formatted properly, they'll just move on to the next. It's a time, they've only got so many hours in the day. And, it's.
I know your background is in contracting, both on the manufacturing and the defense industry. So you've worked around a lot of folks who are former military. You're certainly bringing military talent to your clients, which are numerous.
Yes.
By the way, Steve is an independent guy. He is an entrepreneur, and his company, Global Recruiters of State Line in Illinois, is a mouthful, but I know he's expanding his presence. Steve and I met on LinkedIn, and you mentioned the power of networking, and we will be talking about that in another segment. Let's go back to resumes. One of the questions that comes up for me, and we have about 5 minutes left, is government resumes versus industry resumes.
The main difference is the length of the resume. It really is. And oftentimes in government resumes, we see that everything is put into that resume, and that's okay. That's why you have the master. It's understanding what the person on the other side of the table is requiring or wants to see. So that's the main difference. I work with industry, and industry norms are to shorten that up a little bit and make it 2-ish pages. But it really is, the difference is what's the expectation from the person on the other side of the table. And the expectation in the government is different than it is in industry with regard to the types of resumes and the size and the amount of information that's put in.
Well, I'll tell you this, even if defense contractors are looking at resumes, they're sometimes, I saw a lot of those really long form GS type resumes that the federal resume banks kind of dictate,
Yes.
they work you through a system, and I believe they're changing that. But until they do, I mean, you can upload up to 7 resumes into the government's website, and that, kind of plays to your, let's do specific resumes for specific jobs. But when I saw a government resume, it made me realize that they didn't take the time to look at the company I was representing or really put the flavor. So I can't emphasize enough to the folks who are listening. If you have, just take 15, 20 minutes and make sure that something isn't there that you referred to another company. Really do some housekeeping on it. And if you aren't good at that stuff, find someone within your family or within your trusted circle, or maybe someone who's retired already who's mentoring you that can do that. Certainly,
Ask for
someone
help.
like Steve, if you're going to take on a client and represent them to your companies. So by client, I mean a candidate. So if you were to take any one of the people that are listening today as they transition out of the military, you certainly would go through that with them, right? You would do resume prep.
Absolutely. Yep. We prep at every step of the process, and the resume is a very large step of the process. So yes, we.
Before we wrap up the show with our expert, Steve Cotone, I wanted to ask you, Steve, a little bit about certifications, education, your objective statement. These are important things on the resume. We talked a bit about format, but can you go into more detail on these things and where you like to see them and where your clients like to see them?
Yeah, an objective statement right at the top. That's your first thing, and 3 to 4 sentences, maybe 5. Just a small snippet of what your objective is. Tells a little bit of a story. So I am X, Y, and Z. Whatever your expertise is. Here's I'm a 20-year expert in logistics, supply chain, and whatever that might be. Or I'm a 20-year veteran in engineering and whatever that might be. I would like to be a part of an organization that allows me to. And from certifications, oftentimes it's most common that I see, and I think it fits well, is right below education. So you've got your education at the bottom of the page, and then certifications. You will see, if you're an engineer resumes are a little bit different, not a whole lot different, but sometimes project work on an engineering resume is in the time frame of where that project work happened. So that can be sliced in there too, as long as it's clear and it's concise, and that's just fine. Again, less about format, more about detail on both of those things.
On certs, I want you to talk about acronyms, since we've talked about acronyms. These are
Yes.
where acronyms are important, because recruiting search engines are finding these things. So just keep in mind, for the folks that are listening, and I'll say this as many times as I can to remind you, the folks that are looking for your resumes need specific information. So if you write, let's say you have a certification, Security Plus, and you write out Security Plus. Well, a recruiter who's been recruiting in, they say, IT or engineering space, they might put SEC and then the plus sign and look for that. So SEC and the plus sign is not going to pull up Security Plus if you write it out. So what do you recommend, Steve? Should they do both? Should they put Security Plus and then Sec Plus? Yeah. What do you think?
I would do both. I would put the acronym and then in parentheses what that acronym is.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely do both. Person understands it, and the systems catch it. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Personal contact information. I work a lot in, or have worked a lot in the defense industry with cleared personnel. And a lot of folks in the military serving the DoD are cleared. My biggest beef is to get a resume, be handed a resume that has all of your personal details on it, your address, your physical address where you live, your clearance level. And I really think the most important thing if you're applying to cleared jobs is your clearance level, not your street address. Now, keep in mind, folks, if you're applying to a job, you're putting that information into their system. What are your thoughts on keeping the street address off the resume, Steve?
Phone number, email address, LinkedIn. That's all you need.
Zip code. So if they're
if you can, not really. I mean, you can put city and zip code if you'd like, but the three main things are there because if you're applying for a job and you're in their system, you're going to have to put all of that information in there anyway. So that's going to be in their system. On your resume, if you are applying for the job in a specific location, you could deduce that you're in the area in which they're looking for you to work, or you're willing to move there. Yeah. So I see a lot of resumes that don't have city, don't have personal addresses. It's how you contact people, and it's becoming more common with really those three main things. If you've got a LinkedIn, absolutely put your LinkedIn in there, a way for them to contact you, phone number, and email address, and I'd be in great shape.
Thank you.
You know,
transition time. I'm going to put this in every segment. If you are at least 1 year ahead of your transition time, you want to put that in the resume. We will have specific segments on when you should apply. Your TAPS or ETAPS classes will also talk about this. If you get too far ahead of a company, you might not be considered because those jobs are usually need to be filled now. Working with folks like Steve who can keep you warm and work with you throughout the process. If you are 6 months to a year out, you really have a sort of a recruiting coach on your side. That's a real plus. I think we've really cleared a lot of ground. And Steve, you're such a wonderful person to talk to and bring such a unique knowledge base to this show. Is there anything you'd like to say before we knock off and go to the next expert or the next person who's going through this transition process?
Thank you, Cheryl, for having me. That's it. You know, and people are out there to help. Feel free, reach out to me anytime. Reach out to people that you trust. Reach out to people that you don't know that you want to network with because you're building relationships. It's all about relationships.
I just got goosebumps. Thanks, Steve. We'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Welcome to Exchange.
Welcome back to the show. We've got our I've done it, I'm doing it well segment. Somebody who's been out of the military at least 5 years who, and Will, you're probably going to correct me on this, who's got it all figured out. Welcome to the show, Will Allen.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, and let's kick this off by telling everyone that I really don't have it figured out, but happy to answer all these questions.
Is transition a forever thing? Do you think coming out of the military, getting into back into the civilian world? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, transition for me was actually really tough, and that's because I didn't realize I was transitioning when I was in the middle of it. I had no self-perception around the issue. It actually took a while for me to realize that these stressors that I was feeling, which I think are pretty natural for anyone that's been to war zones and back, were totally natural. I felt like I was in control of the things in my life, but I wasn't. And I had a hard time admitting that And so transition really sucked for me, and it took the perspective of my my wife and my parents, my family, to help me see that and understand that, and and I had all the faculties in life, resources, schooling, right, like a fancy education, a loving family to fall back on. And so now when I think about transition, I think about other vets. I always think about the guys that get out and don't have those things, and about how transition for them is going to be extra challenging, and how we should be extra understanding in their situation. Yeah.
You bring up a great point. When all these stressors are hitting you, and getting a job is a full-time job. It really is. It's an 8-hour-a-day thing.
Yeah.
You're going to put out hundreds of applications, potentially thousands, and you may not hear back from a quarter of them. If you've got stressors in your life, if things aren't really rolling in the deep, you might have challenges during the process.
Well,
how did that affect your career transition? How did these things happen?
Yeah,
and impact?
Yeah, I think that like any other veteran, right? I got out, and I too was applying for everything under the sun, and I damn near fell back on just becoming a cop or a firefighter, which are fine things to do. But it just seemed so obvious. Like, well, I carry a weapon for a living, and so why don't I just keep doing that? And so I applied to every police department that I thought would be cool. I applied to federal agencies. The lead times on those were very long, though. I had to go through polygraphs and background checks, and my TS clearance didn't transition from one agency to another, or whatever it might be. I had the challenge of going into local police departments, and they would look at me suspiciously, and I'd be looking at them like, well, you've never been under fire, and this became this measuring contest between people who have no business doing that, because we're all on the same side. But I was in grad school, and I really felt lost in terms of, like, outside of carrying a weapon, what can I do? What should I do? I was in New York City at the time. I was blocks away from Wall Street, and aside from walking onto Wall Street, I had no idea how to get onto Wall Street. I had no idea how to get a job there. But I could walk to it. It wasn't self-evident to me, and I felt like I was kind of like, walking in a dark room, just kind of like feeling my way along. So in terms of like being in the soup, if you will, I was in it. I mean, and we're talking about somebody who is a Marine officer, again, loving family, loving wife, Marine officer, Ivy League education, and I felt completely lost in the process. So,
What was some of the scaffolding aside from family? What helped you the most?
it's a great question. What helped me most? I think that there was a forcing mechanism, which maybe veterans have it. Maybe all vets get to this point. Maybe they don't. I don't know. The forcing mechanism was pure frustration, in that I had taken a job. I was deeply unsatisfied. I've got some funny stories about working at this place where I treated it like the Marine Corps, and like they threatened to fire me because they were like, you can't force your subordinates to run at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like, but it's good for them, and it's good for their life, and and they're and they're fat, and they're like, you can't say fat, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this is how we do it, like. This is good for them, and I'm not hazing them. I can't haze myself. I'm doing it with them. It was like my seemingly obvious logic. But then I had gotten to the point when I was working for this large, multi-billion-dollar consulting firm where I literally just got in a truck, drove to California until I hit the ocean, and I said, I'm starting over, and you can either fire me or keep me hired if you want, but I've hit a breaking point. And that's what happened. And so it was almost out of pure desperation that I realized that I needed to break away from, for me, this is my story, like I needed to break away from the corporate structure. I needed to break away from those expectations, wearing a suit every day, putting a tie on, and I needed to break out and get into entrepreneurship, someplace where I could be my own boss and I could run or walk as fast or slow as I wanted to. And, I heard Ash Carter. I attended a talk with Ash Carter at the Center for, what is the acronym? It's CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. And Ash Carter said, in today's world, he said, back in the Greatest Generation, in his generation and then one before him, the Greatest Generation, careers were like escalators. You'd get on at the bottom, you'd do your time, and you'd arrive at the top. And everybody was kind of in order, and there was somebody you were following behind and somebody behind you. But that today, careers for Gen X or millennials, it's more like a jungle gym. And you can pick and choose the direction and the pathway that you want to take to get to the top. And if you've got the God-given ability to jump a few rungs by yourself, you can do that. And I always felt like that was, first of all, it was really nice to hear a senior leader, i.e. somebody I trusted, express and articulate something I felt like I was seeing but couldn't articulate myself. Like, why am I on this escalator? It's so frustrating. It never goes faster. It never goes slower. It just goes. And then when he said that, I was like, I don't think I should be apologizing for these feelings. I feel like I should get in some open space, like in soccer, and start running. And the ball will come to me. Let's develop the play in open space. You don't develop it in between players. Does that make sense?
It does. And when you talk about the escalator, it reminds me of the military, because you start at the bottom and you rank your way up. You continually go your way up. I'm wondering, though, you're a veterapreneur. You're an iconoclast. You're definitely 100% a Marine. And once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yeah, I think that just means I'm loud. Thanks for that.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. But you have the hallmarks of what is the number one performance measurement for anybody, entrepreneur, veterapreneur, and that's determination. You're determined not to fit in an uncomfortable box. For the folks listening, and maybe not everybody has your style, your personality, or was even in the Marine Corps, what would you suggest to them to kind of break out of that? I'm going to stand on the escalator and wait for it to take me to the top. I'm going to enter a company, or I'm going to expect that the world today is going to start me at the bottom and pull me up to the top, just like the military did.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of, there are basic military, like kind of values that I learned in the military, which I think are applicable here. There are others that I learned in the military which were not applicable, that kept me in the box or kept me on the escalator. Like, the expectation that real jobs come with suits and ties and fancy socks. And, Like, I felt like that was obviously what I should be doing, because any self-respecting Marine officer should be playing a serious game in a serious city like Washington, D.C. And all those fakes out in L.A. are not real. They're worried about Kim Kardashian. And so I would write that off and be like, that's not real. That's not right. But I came to find out that, like, that's not true. Some of the best things that I learned in the Marine Corps were, like, if I want to develop a situation, I can attack. We have this phrase in the Marine Corps called recon by fire. It's like, well, what is over there? I don't know. Let's go shoot at it. Sounds a little dangerous, but, if it shoots back, then great, there's bad guys. If it doesn't shoot back, then, we can reasonably assume we can occupy that space. So, when I was on the escalator, I was very worried about not appearing or not or doing things that might get me off the escalator. And then I realized that, like, when I was successful in Silicon Valley or in California, let's say in the startup space, it was exactly those things, kind of like not lashing out, but like doing non-traditional things that would get me ahead. For example, you don't have to be nice to everyone. Like, I used to be basically a people pleaser, because when I was in the Marines, I wanted all of my Marines to like me, and I wanted to get along with all the officers, and I wanted my seniors to give me great fit reps. I wanted to be on the Christmas tree. I wanted to be ranked really high on the Christmas tree, and so I was a people pleaser, and so that's just how it was. And I felt like that's what it meant to be a professional or to get ahead. And then, I'm not advocating anyone to be rude, but the second you meet somebody who's not value accretive to what you're doing, but actually a drag on what you're doing, you got to cut them out. Cut them out, and you move on viciously. Like, it's the violence of action, which is like a great way to describe. Again, like, I learned the violence of action in the Marine Corps, but I also learned how to be a people pleaser in the Marine Corps for careerism purposes. And so I was only listening to one part of my brain, which was that, like, professionalism side, and I wasn't listening to the aggressive side of my brain, which in entrepreneurship, it's all about maneuver warfare. Complacency kills. You always have to be, reconning by fire, always be attacking. If you feel like you're in a safe position, you're about to get attacked. Like, time to move to a new position, even if there's no threat, like, because you're probably getting ambushed at that point. And all of these same attributes apply to entrepreneurship and maneuver warfare. And I think the greatest founders that I've either invested in or served with in California have all had that same mindset. And what I'm most impressed by is that they have that attack first mentality, and they were never in the Marine Corps. And so that's really cool to see that some people are just born forward leaning, born as people that don't settle. And so I think we learned both of those skills in the Marine Corps. There's a time to be on the attack and there's a time to be reserved. And when you get out and you get into the corporate world of, whatever, management consulting or banking or whatever, you think you got to put a suit on and be reserved. Negative. High and to the right, go on the attack, and all of a sudden your life will go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, so on and so forth. And I think that that's powerful stuff.
Give me a story where that sort of attack mindset didn't work outside of maybe your VC background, venture capital background.
Well, I definitely have, it's kind of like a game of operation, when you've got the little tweezers and you hit the edges and it shocks you or whatever. Being an outside the box thinker, or being creative, or maybe being a little crass around the edges, and sometimes you hit the edges. and I've had an opportunity where, I thought I was being efficient when really I was being rude. And it didn't land me in hot water, but somebody I respected was like, hey, that's not cool. And I was like, oh shit, okay. There's the left and right lateral limits of what you can do to be effective. And then there's a point where, and then people exist like this in Silicon Valley. Trust me, I know them. They're just so crass or so, rude, if you will, that they think it's being efficient, but everyone around them is like, yeah, that person's, I would never work with that person. And so once you hear people say that, you're like, okay, well, so I get it. Like, there's forward leaning and then there's rudeness. Let's know the difference between the two of those and make sure that we're always ethical, moral, kind, respectful, but also not a chump. And I'm not going to hang around if somebody's dragging me down. Does that make sense?
Exactly. I think that's going to be the name of your book. Will hit the edges.
Definitely.
Definitely hit the edges. And I think a good point for our listeners is don't be afraid to hit those edges, because if you are working in a good environment, you're going to get feedback, hopefully, and from people that you can develop relationships with. Some of the best career advice I got was on the job. And it was not in a book. It was not at a conference I spent 10 grand going to. It was from somebody who said, you might want to rethink your style. Or someone coming back to me and saying, I don't like to be talked to that way. Being transparent is great. Radical honesty is all in vogue right now. But guess what? It doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. Well, the person that told me, hey, that's not okay, he didn't hold it against me either. He just counseled me and moved on. And I was like, all right, he's a pro. Because I feel like, maybe if that was somebody else, and I know Marines that would definitely do this, they would counsel me, and then that's what they would remember.
Yes.
But he didn't, right? He counseled me, I learned, we moved on, we've worked together later on in life, and that's been fantastic. So it was a learning experience, but I wasn't damaged by it, right? So
I love it. You're giving me gold nuggets, man. I love
Good.
this.
Good.
So tell me a little bit more about your podcast. Talk about it.
Sure.
As you're introducing it.
Sure, yeah. So I run a podcast called the America Builds Podcast. It's predicated upon the belief that the national security apparatus and Silicon Valley founders and investors are actually aligned and incentivized to work on the same projects. I think for many, many years, people assumed in the Valley and of course outside the Valley that DoD and Silicon Valley were not aligned. But in reality, historically, in fact, Silicon Valley got much of its original funding from the federal government. And in fact, on one of our recent shows, we were talking about the history of Sherman Fairchild, who's somebody who has owned many, many companies, like 20 or 30 different companies. And, his name is on the venerable A-10 Warthog aircraft, the Fairchild Republic aircraft. He's also, somebody who was responsible for building the cameras that went on the Apollo 11 mission that landed on the moon. He's also one of the pioneers in the semiconductor industry. And so a lot of what Silicon Valley has to give thanks to is actually government spending and I don't just mean fat IDIQ contracts. I mean folks that get out of World War II, used the GI Bill, got into tech, lived in California, had a relationship with the government, and we were doing exciting things like going to the moon. And so, of course, Silicon Valley was involved there. Since then, the narrative has created this huge, there's been a divide in the narrative where people don't want to work for the federal government. They're afraid of AI. They don't want to work for the joint, the JAIC, the Joint AI Center. There's been some like high level, news coverage on this. And though I hear their concerns, I think more engagement with your government, especially if you're distrusting of the government, is a good thing. Civilians should take responsibility for what their government's doing, not bifurcate and build a divide between it. And so I bring on investors and founders and also government folks who are interested in bridging this divide and working together on some really incredible stuff, inspirational stuff. And so that's what it's focused on. It tries to tell the stories of people who are in the trenches, literally in some cases and metaphorically in others, that are trying to build this bridge between Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for focusing on those people. They're in the dark. A lot of the outside world, I'll say outside of the DoD or the U.S. military, doesn't understand that the power of the R&D behind the DoD, that they are they're really ahead of the curve on some things, behind the curve on a lot of other things too, for sure. I saw your post on quantum computing. It's like, when is the military going to march in? When are we going to kick Google's ass? How might we get ahead of this? Well, and technology, I'll say this just as a user and somebody who's also in that space, I see a lot of opportunity for people to go and assist governments because there are those technical talents. They sometimes sit within the government as GS. Sometimes they are military. A lot of times they're consultants. But a lot of really cool tech is coming out of the military, and you just don't hear about it.
Well, so the post that talks about march-in rights, so let's just add some perspective here. Basically, Google created a quantum computer that has 70 qubits and now can instantly compute something, any equation, that would otherwise take a traditional computer, the most powerful traditional computer in the world, 47 years to compute. So 47 years of equations can be done instantly by this quantum computer. Pretty incredible. And so, the comment that I made on LinkedIn, of course, was, when is the government going to exercise their march-in rights? And so march-in rights is the federal government's right, its ability to literally commandeer a technology that is seen as strategic in any way, shape, or form. So what's interesting about the government's relationship with Silicon Valley is that entrepreneurs will tell you, well, that scares me. If I build something that's so incredible, the government can just come in and take it. And the simple answer is like both yes and no. Originally, march-in rights were developed because in World War II, because if a company was manufacturing a strategic manufactured good, let's say, I don't know, an airplane or a piece of an artillery shell, and then it went out of business, the government wanted the right to go in, take the IP, and continue producing it, even if it didn't have rights to it. So it had developed march-in rights. And so if you ever do work with the federal government, you're typically asked to sign an agreement to march-in rights so that they can take that if they ever need it in the future. It's never been enacted in the history of the Department of Defense. They've never marched in to take in any company's technology. So this is where maybe a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous, because it's like, oh, well, I know what march-in rights in, and I would never work with the government and sign that contract. Well, it's like, they're not trying to take over Tinder, right? They're not trying to take over your technology. It's just something that people, agree to, just in case the end of days is here. And so I think sometimes talking about march-in rights can be an exciting topic, because it's like, what are we doing with TikTok? What are we doing with Huawei? How does the government exercise its power through ITAR regulations or CFIUS regulations? They've never had to go to a march-in right and actually commandeer a company. And this includes companies like General Motors and GE, who were basically commandeered by the federal government for production rates during World War II to produce all of those tanks and trucks and all that jazz. I mean, a lot of vehicles and consumer goods were just stopped from being manufactured. So even in those dire times, we didn't exercise march-in rights. So
good to know. It is more of a partnership. I've seen it. I've worked in those spaces, and I agree. Well, you are on fire, man. I love it. I want you to, we're going to skip to another question, because I'm going to do this one just separate. I want to talk to you about, I want you to keep that energy high and really come at the listener with, what I wish I knew then that I knew now, and just go, just riff.
About the transition.
career transition.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I wish I knew that I later found out is that like there's this false sense of authority. It's a real authority when you get into the U.S. military. If I don't show up at my assigned place of work and I'm UA, or after 30 days I'm AWOL, when they find me, they're gonna put my ass into jail. That's just how it works, right? Or I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble at least. I'll be on restriction. I won't be able to drink alcohol. They've got their dials they can dial up and dial down to make a Marine's life hell. But when I got out, I realized I was pretty compliant with people whom were idiots. And I guess I don't want to sound rude, but like I just started working for people and I was like, I know that I can outrun you. Not literally. Well, yes, literally too. But like I know I can run circles around you. And why am I on this escalator that goes at this speed when I could be going at a different speed? And so I didn't have a sense of agency. Like, I have accurate self-perception. I have the ability to make a decision about my career. I have the ability to run at the speed that I want to run. And guess what? It's okay. It's okay if you don't wear a suit and tie. It's okay if you don't wear fancy shoes with your suit. It's okay. You're especially in the Marine Corps. This is an interesting comparison. You know how I know if somebody's a good Marine? If they have great sleeves, like the way we roll our sleeves. If you've got nice tight sleeves, you can be like, that's a good Marine. If he's got really trashy sleeves, you're like, that's a shitbag. Like everyone knows it. That's like when you walk into a room, you can tell who the good Marines are and who the bad Marines are based on their sleeves. Ask any Marine that. It's the way they observe Marine Corps Order 1020 and 34 Golf, which is the Marine Corps' order on uniforms. Like, do you look good in your uniform or not? And I thought that that's like your value in the civilian world. Oh, you look good. You got a good job. Blah blah blah. It wasn't. I wasn't getting rewarded for my ideas in the Marine Corps. I was getting rewarded for dumb things like showing up at 7 a.m. and looking hot in my uniform. Like that's what I was getting rated on. Among other things, obviously, there's a leadership piece to this, which certainly the Marine Corps is great at, like making leaders and judging those leaders, and I think that they do a decent job at that, especially creating leaders at the NCO rigs. But when I got out, I realized that I had to break from those chains, and I had to realize that like my self-value was not tied up in the way I looked, the way I spoke, the job title that I held. And I had to break away from that. And, working in D.C. was really challenging because the entire industry placates that escalator. The entire industry. It's like you will be in D.C. for 20 years doing chores and errands for somebody for just for the chance to talk to the congressman. Just for the chance to talk to the partner at the lobbying firm, just for the chance to work for this managing director at Deloitte. And what I realized when I left DC is that everyone outside DC thinks that's a joke. And that like it's a big nasty joke where a bunch of people who get out of the military or have fancy Ivy League degrees work for pennies on a hamster wheel. And they devalue themselves. And the second I got to California and I started telling people like, well, I went to a great school and I was in the Marines and blah, blah, blah. Folks in the investment community were like, what? That's incredible. You've traveled the world. You've led people in complicated and stressful environments. You've got a nice degree, which means you could probably put two thoughts together and articulate it verbally and in a written form. And I started to get rewarded for those things. Where in DC, it was about, who was I doing errands for? Who was I doing errands for? And who do I know? And so the joke is, of course, when you meet somebody in DC, they say, well, what do you work for? It's like the first question that comes out of their mouth. And in Silicon Valley, it's like, well, what do you do? It's like very different things, and maybe the most important question is like, not what do you do, but how do you do it? Like, do you do it with passion? Do you do it with love? Do you do it with intensity? Do you do it with integrity? You can get rewarded for those things in places other than Washington, D.C. And so that's how I broke the chains. My story is obviously tied to D.C. and me like breaking from this corporate structure, military structure in D.C. and going to California, putting on a pair of sandals and trying to get rich. Like that's obviously like what my trajectory has been. That's another, I think, kind of like thing to talk about, which is I stopped hiding what it is I wanted to do. Like in DC, I felt like, well, I want to climb up the corporate ladder. So how do I do that? Like, and in Washington, when I left it and went to California, it was more about like, well, how do I create value? which I thought was really interesting. It's like a new way, a new paradigm of like looking at that. And in my newfound agency as somebody who could just do anything, walk in anywhere, talk to anyone, like I didn't have to ask permission to talk to the boss, if you will. Another great example, and then I'll stop here just for you to react to some of this, is like when I was in DC, there was this guy I worked with who would call generals, like general officers and admirals, by their first name. And he would be like, oh, Jim Mattis, or Steve, or Tom, or whatever it might be. And I remember being like, you are so disrespectful. You haven't done what they've done. You haven't been where they've been. You haven't blah, 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 blah. And to an extent, right, like we can respect our elders. We can respect people who've been there and done that, no doubt. However, I was using this rank structure in the civilian world as a set of chains to keep me back. I mean, I'd meet a colonel, and I'd be like, oh, colonel this, or blah, blah, blah. And immediately he saw me as a lieutenant or as a captain, and I was subservient to them. Mm-hmm. When I got to Silicon Valley, you know, I literally had like investors just tell me like, you sound like a chump. The guy's name is Jim. Just call him Jim. Just call him Jim. And it was like, okay. So then I'd go into a meeting and be like, hey, Jim. And he'd be like, hey, Will, how's it going?
Yeah.
And I realized, I was like, what the fuck? We're like on an even level? We're like on an equal playing field all of a sudden? Like, holy smokes. Yeah. And then I had Jim, this guy with a 4-star general. I was like, well, you know, I haven't been in the private sector as long as you have, so maybe you can help me do this. And I'm like, am I your mentor? Like, holy smokes. Like, you know, it just like totally changed the paradigm because I refuse to now play by these rules. And I think, true story, I've worked with several general officers and admirals, an immense amount of respect for all of them. And I say that, I say, you know, if you don't mind, I'm just going to call you Jim or whatever. The only time I called somebody sir is when actually Jim Mattis called me. And I picked up the phone. Yeah, I picked up the phone and I was like, hey, sir, how you doing? And he was like, call me Jim. And I was like, I'm just going to stick with sir. The
yes,
patron saint of Quantico, you know, like this.
I'll call you Jim, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I completely understand. You know, he always carries a book around with him. I'm a big fan of Mad Dog Mattis. Same story. I was working at a government contracting company, and we'd hired an advisor, former 4-star, and one of the only African-American 4-stars in the Army. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Nobody was in the office. I was supposed to give him a gift. I live in Hawaii. I was supposed to give him a lei, which is, you know, women will lei the men and men will lei the women. So giving him, I'm running around the office with these flowers in my hand. I'm like, what do I call him? Former Mr. General, this, that. So I barge into a Marine Corps fellow and I said, hey, what do I call so-and-so? And he said, his first name. We go by first names here. Yeah. And I thought, that's going to be so strange. I tried so hard. Dude, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Hello, sir. How are you today? And it kind of, you know, here's your flowers. Aloha. Welcome to Hawaii, sir. Former generals. You know, it was struggling. So now he's been there 4 or 5 years, and I'm still a consultant for them. But I see him, and I'm like, dude, Dennis, how you doing?
Yeah.
Takes a minute. It takes a minute. Thanks so much, Will. You're a rock star, and I could talk to you all damn day long. But we're definitely going to keep in touch, and cool. I'm going to be following America Builds. America Builds.
Let's hope it works.
And you can find it on Spotify
and www.americabuilds.com.
Okay.
And my LinkedIn, which if you just Google like Will Allen and Marines, Harpoon, or Columbia, any of those keywords, you'll find me. Yeah. There's a lot of William Allens. You're right. I didn't play in the NFL, though. There's an NFL player named William Allen, and we're just, you know, we look very different. So
yeah, I like it. I like how you've differentiated yourself. You're a rock star. Thanks so much for being on the show. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Welcome to Exchange.
On this so many times. If I could put a salary talk in every single segment, I would, and I probably will, because this is the number one thing that I feel is you're hitting a wall when you get to the salary negotiation part. Brandy, you've got experience not only as a former Navy vet, but as a military spouse and now a civilian who is in their own business and making their own income. And you mentor people who are coming out of the military looking to get into your industry. Tell me a little bit about your frustrations when you hear the salary talk.
Well, my frustration mainly in most recent times was as a military spouse. So as we transitioned out of the military, my husband knew how much he would be making for retirement. And obviously, he got a little bit for disability as well. So when the salary conversation came up, when he was looking for a job, he was calculating how much he was making for disability, how much he was making for his retirement, and how much he needed to make or felt like he needed to make with the other job. And yeah, I think probably devaluing himself as, how experienced he was and what he was asking for, because he said, well, this is fine. That amount is fine because altogether I will be making XYZ. But, he had 26 years of military service and had a master's degree in management. So, I mean, in the workforce, very valuable and probably should be a pretty close, if not definitely a six-figure earner. But because he had these other incomes, he felt like he could, I guess, step down as far as compensation. So, military members don't really know how to negotiate their compensation because they have never really calculated all the bonuses that they're getting. So that's healthcare, housing, all of those bonus incomes that you get that are not actually on your W-2. I mean, you see that you made like 60,000, 70,000 last year, but it didn't really account for BAH, BAS, all your other income. So when you add that together and you think about your salary on the outside, you have to make sure that you're negotiating for the amount that you need to pay your bills, of course, but also pay for healthcare if that's a necessity of your families. Put some money aside, contribute to a 401k. So it's very important that you put all those pieces together when you're negotiating your future salary.
Agreed. Now, you obviously had an impact on your spouse at the time. Don't tell me his salary, but were you able to help him reframe after you brought this to his attention?
Absolutely, 100%. We definitely had this exact same discussion. It was exactly do not account for this other income. That doesn't mean anything to your employer at all.
No.
This is what your value is. So you need to actually negotiate your value and what you're bringing to the table. You are not a new employee who just graduated college. You have 26 years of managing people, and that's important to this organization. So make sure that you you put value on that. And you don't discount yourself because you have not worked in the civilian world because it's a little intimidating. And I think we all probably tend to devalue ourselves. It does take a lot of people to talk us up and say, you do bring something to the table. You are important. But when we're really stressing about getting the job, you kind of will take anything. And that I think that's where I think you and I had a conversation earlier where most people will change jobs at least three times after they exit the military. Like the statistics are so high that you are going to change employment again. So you really don't want to bank everything on that position. And I think
No.
the other thing that I have to say about that is a lot of times we'll base them off of an equivalent government job or GS position. So we'll say, this is how much I would make in that position. But those are also underpaid because there are some other benefits.
Right. Pensions, the pension for a GS
hmm
job is spectacular sometimes. And it's very similar to a military kind of career path. Now, Brandy, thank you for bringing that up because I think that, salary is always, as a corporate recruiter who's interviewed so many people looking for jobs that are coming directly from the military, admittedly, they say, I've never done this before. And that's okay. We don't expect you to run a marathon if you've been sitting on the couch and you're just going out the door for the first time. But what would you say, and you were obviously a great negotiator before your husband left the military, and you had eyeballs, and you two were working as a team which a lot of folks don't have.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people say, I'll say, would you like to go home and talk to your family about that? Nope. Nope. And as a corporate recruiter, I was never really able to be that ambassador for the salary. But if they truly undervalued themselves financially for salary, that put them at risk for getting the job because they didn't understand the scope. And that's a real hot topic in the world of recruiting, and it makes a big impact on the people that are coming into the workforce. I do think, Brandy, just like you said, people are leaving their first job, their second job, their third job. I talk to people on this show, people who have had terrible first job experiences, went back in, re-enlisted to the Guards Reserves, got back as far as they could, went through government contracting because the outside world was so not just unfamiliar, but the pay. The pay didn't really support them in the way that the military did. And for those of you listening at wherever you are, on the treadmill, jogging path, in the car, in your home office, in your ear pods, I just want to remind you that, everybody's got a different journey, and you're going to learn this by doing it. Nobody's great at it the first time, and you're going to mess up. And maybe you have one or two jobs after the military that don't serve you. But the goal is to get you comfortable with, the ask when you get there. And the hardest one is, what are your salary expectations? I would ask that, and people would just hit a wall. An hour-long conversation would just stop, and they'd say, I don't know. And that's why I created the podcast. That's why I created salary negotiation workshops for my Military Family Support Center as a volunteer, because you can't talk about this enough. Brandy, it's an important topic. I know everyone listening believes this too. What would you give them as a tool? What could they do now? Let's say they're ahead of their separation. What could they do in terms of research? And you know this from a location specialist job. You're dealing with people who are coming to your area for specific reasons. And I know you chose your area for specific reasons. What could they do?
Well, what's really exciting is that one of the things that I was evaluating when my ex-husband was getting out of the service, and one of the things that a spouse can do as well is attend a TAPS class with their spouse. So you can go to a TAPS class and hear what they're hearing because, two additional ears hearing will help in that whole transition when you're getting out of the service. So that's one thing. And one of the things that they've implemented recently, I guess since I got out of the military, was a budgeting class. And I don't know if you know this about military people, but we all didn't come from amazing financial backgrounds. We probably wouldn't be probably enlisted had we come from amazing financial backgrounds. So we don't join out of patriotism. We join because it's, economically makes sense. And we learn through the process of being in the military to manage our finances. And some, we fall, we stumble a lot. And hopefully by the time you get to a point of getting out of the military, you would have gotten to a place of financial stability. And from that, that's the biggest piece, of course, is getting to that piece where you can take the job that's right for you instead of taking the first job that's being offered to you, right? That'll help you make some of the better decisions. So making a budget, being financially prepared are two big pieces that you really have to do. And then another piece that I did, I don't exactly remember the website that I went to, but it helped me evaluate like what the cost of living was where I was going versus where I was. So we were living in Hawaii, had intentions of retiring in Hawaii. Obviously, the cost of living is pretty high there. And we wanted to see comparably, if I move to Texas, what will that look like? And it would let me know like groceries are 40% less expensive in Texas than they are in Hawaii. So when you're doing your budgeting, you can make sure that you take that into account. I wish I knew what that website is. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Well, and when you do, we'll link it in the comments. So there are a lot of, calculators and comparison. I know a lot of realtors have that on their website. So it shouldn't be too hard to find. But I think that is, as we talk about, my goal is for you, the listener, to go into a job negotiation. And when you get to that salary conversation, say exactly what you need and not blink. And hopefully you've gone enough into the conversation with a trusted resource, either a recruiter, a contingency recruiter, a corporate recruiter, somebody who's really moving you along, or a friend who works at the company that can guide you. But when you say that salary, it's very important that you know, because negotiation starts when you start saying what you want. And negotiation is also, I mean, we can talk about that. Brandy, you're an excellent negotiator. You do it every day for your work. But I want everyone to be empowered to not be afraid of that, because when I saw folks just pull back, and I mean people with 30 some odd years in the industry who come out as technical specialists, and they are so valuable, but they couldn't put a dollar amount on their worth. Location is so important. Family conversations are so important because, like you said, Brandy, Hawaii, I love living in Hawaii. I work very hard to live in Hawaii. I'm very lucky to live in Hawaii because it's beautiful and it's safe and it's clean and it's Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
I've lived in other high cost of living places, New York, Los Angeles. I'm originally from Las Vegas. That's not too cheap, but for folks in Hawaii, that's called the Ninth Island. A lot of people are going there because it is less expensive.
Definitely.
And it's also a break. But I would know my worth going to Las Vegas too. It wouldn't be the same level that I need for Hawaii. So again, did you check? Let's pivot for a second. When you were going through this with your family member, did you have a couple locations you were looking at, or was it always Texas?
No, it was definitely Texas. That was just a place that I had always wanted to live, so it was important to me. But for my business, for me specifically, in deciding where I was going to live, um, Hawaii is a very high cost area. So when I'm making commission, obviously off of selling homes that are $1 million, where I come to a state where, the pretty average is around 350,000, I really need to manage my own compensation expectations. So where I located specifically in Texas did have a little bit for me personally to get closer to Austin, where the home prices or were similar to what I was dealing with in Hawaii. So that was important for me. Um,
Good.
for my
Good to
for
know.
my husband, not so much.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate all the energy you're putting into this conversation. And again, I could talk about this for hours. It's something that it just has so many shades. Every single person is going to handle a negotiation on salary differently. One of the big takeaways I hope that you're leaving with today, and I mean you, the listener, is that it's okay to to try and fail. You are
Yeah.
going to get that job. I really do feel that everybody will get a job. There's jobs out there. We're
Yeah.
in a labor market that is compressed. It is challenging for companies to find good people. The jobs aren't the problem. The lack of jobs are not the problem. It's the ability for you, the listener, to fit into a role where you're satisfied, where your needs are met. I'll use the analogy of Hawaii because I've said this so many times. I'm pretty sure when I was working in an office, people next to me could quote me. I would say this: I want you to look up Hawaii on the cost of living scale. I want you to do a comparison between where you're living and where you plan to live here, and then come back to me in 24 hours and tell me your salary expectations. If you have not prepared, I want you to prepare, and I'd love for you to speak to your family about this. When you've fully done your research, I will share that with the hiring managers because that's the type of people we want to hire. Well, that doesn't always happen in corporations. I've seen corporations that are really apt to underpaying people and they don't care, but they also lose those folks. And if I'm an independent consultant that works with companies on retention, I tell people all the time, it has to start at the recruiting. You've got to recruit the people at the right amount and make them happy and train them. And that all starts at that conversation. So I've gone on a little bit. Brandy, this is your part of this segment. I want to know how people can maybe reach out to you because you are a location specialist. You've had such experience. And by the way, how many PCSs did you do in that 20 some odd years?
I
How
think
many
because
places
we
did you
stayed in,
live?
yeah, I think because we stayed in Hawaii for 12 of those years, I think we PCS probably about 7 times.
That's
So
still a lot.
it is still a lot. So, but
for
I hear some people
for
that
us
have done it like
civilians.
a lot. Mine
Yeah.
wasn't that much. But still, I mean, it was all each one very impactful, on our family.
Yeah. Well, again, Brandy, tell us how you can be contacted. I know you have a website,
I
and we
do.
have your name spelled here. It's Brandy with an I. What is your website?
Correctly. Yeah, correct. brandybrickler.com has all of my information, my email, my telephone number where you can get into contact with me. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you if you have questions about especially Texas or Hawaii or anywhere. I can help you transition into what it looks like to live in that area so you're financially prepared.
Great. I so thank you for your information. Not only you are a friend, but you are a great advocate, and I appreciate you supporting this show. We're going to have Brandy on as the military spouse career conversations where we get to talk with her for more than just 15 minutes. But for now, we're just going to say goodbye, and I know we're going to have you on for another segment of the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I can't believe we're already at 3 episodes. It's because of you that this journey is continuing on. Thank you so much for asking for Voices of Transition. My guests today, Derik Clark. We had Steve Cotone, William Allen, and Brandy Brickler. Hey, thanks so much. I know that you're going to be enjoying all of the episodes, and we've got lots of shows ahead of us. But before you move on, I just want to say a special thanks. This show is very, very personal for me. My job as a corporate recruiter, I saw so many things, and I believe I could give you books or trainings or all of that, but you're going to learn so much more from just listening to the people who've gone through it. So thanks for joining us. Before you leave, I'm always going to sign off with this. Just remember, you are strong, you are brave, you are skilled, and you are trained, and these are all things that the civilian workforce needs. Until next time, I'll see you soon.
Post-production for this episode is done with care by oceantreecreative.com.